Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have three questions I want to dive into. But first, before I do that, just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you found this podcast be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast as we want to continue to get this information out to more and more people. So appreciate that. And so again, appreciate everybody who listens as well too. Next, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And you can ask me any questions there. You can ask me if you're not sure on something on the podcast, whatever that is. You can reach out to me there. And then if I do my weekly Q&As there, and I come on here and answer some of those as well too. There. With that out of the way, let's dive into today's questions. We have three questions. The first question is my current position on how to determine which muscle is stimulated during an exercise. And I think this is good, right? I think that this is a good question because, hey, how do I know what muscle groups am I working here with this, right? And so my first thing is just a somewhat basic understanding of biomechanics and movement patterns. So what I mean by that is, okay, so we know knee extension, that's going to be something that hits the rectus femoris, right? So we're looking at things like leg extensions. Again, we can just trust the biomechanics and again, just these kind of general movement patterns to hit certain muscle groups, right? We know that squat patterns where we see that knee move forward is going to hit quads, going to hit a little bit of glute. We know that when you flex the elbow, that's going to hit the bicep, right? We know that when you extend the elbow, that could be a tricep movement. So these are all things that, again, having a basic understanding of biomechanics and then just movement patterns will help us here determine, hey, we have an idea. This is probably what's going to hit that muscle group, right? So we have that. But then on top of it, I have a couple other proxies. One, are you getting a pump in that muscle? I know some people are like, the pump doesn't mean anything. But if you're getting a pump in, say, your bicep and you're doing curls, it's okay. It's pretty safe that you are hitting the bicep in that exercise. If you're doing, say, like a squat, and again, generally speaking, squats are going to hit quads, but you feel it more in your glutes and you feel a little bit more like a kind of pump burn in your glutes. It could be a technique thing, right? Where we can adjust it to potentially hit the quads more than your glutes, right? So again, that would be something that we would want to potentially look at there for that. And then do you feel some sort of tension in that muscle, right? Same type of thing here. If you're doing like a heel elevated split squat and you're pushing your knee forward and you're really feeling it in your quads, again, we know that with that movement pattern, that's going to be something that should hit the quads. And then we know that if you're feeling it in the quads, that is probably a quad exercise. Again, some people may listen to this and be like, there's other proxies, there's other things. What's the exact way? And I think it is hard to know exactly. Really, this is how I go about it. And from there, if clients or myself has underdeveloped muscle groups, is it a volume thing? Do we need to work on your technique to that there? Is it an exercise selection thing? Do we need to change exercises that hit that muscle group more? But again, this gives us a good base. And then from there, we just have to wait and see. I think sometimes people want that exact thing. If this is exactly what this hits, and again, we have a good idea, we have a good understanding, but it is really hard to know for sure because in the day we could have all these things, but each person's body is a little bit different. And the way they do a movement may change where they feel it or what muscle group is being activated. So those are my big things there. Some people may be like, does that mean that you think the pump leads to muscle growth? And I think that's a yes or no. I don't think we know for sure. I don't think it's like a, hey, you need to chase that. And then boom, it's going to lead to muscle growth. But I think it's a good proxy of, hey, if you're getting a pump, we're probably in a solid position there. You're at least stimulating that particular muscle. And we're well on our way to seeing some muscle growth in whatever muscle that is. So that's my position on it. Again, I think with this, that gives us a good, solid understanding. And then from there, we just have to be patient and see if whatever muscle group it is growing, right? There's so many things that could go into it. If it's not, it could be the exercise selection. It could be your technique. It could be the amount of volume you're doing. It could be the intensity at which you're training at. All these things are certainly going to be impactful from that perspective. Cool. So with that one out of the way, let's dive into question number 2. So question number 2 is advice, in parentheses, new parent / anyone experiencing a big transition on how to maintain healthy habits. I think this is good, right? Because we're all going to have these kind of phases in life where things are going to pop up. And I think where people go wrong is they feel like they need to push 100% at all times through everything. And that's where you get that burnout. And then you just get down on yourself for not being able to stay on track. And especially if you have that perfection mindset, you have that all or nothing mindset. This is where I see things really bite you in the butt. And over time, you get these ebbs and flows of you're really progressing and then you stop doing everything because you have a busy time and you feel like you need to do everything at once. And so then you go this extended period of time without doing anything. And then it's hard to get back into it. And then you get back to it. And then boom, something happens. And so it's these ebbs and flows where you're working hard, but you just flatline over time. And really, obviously you can't see this if you're listening. We're going to have those ebbs and flows, but we want to try to make sure those ebbs and flows are tight right? They're not like really high and then really low. They're tight. And then over time, we want to make sure the trajectory is going upwards. And I find that if you don't work on habits and you don't work on certain things, that's where you get yourself into trouble, where you go up and down. And again, over time, that trajectory is just very flat, or it's like just very like small going up to where you can't detect it and you get down on yourself here. I can work hard for a little bit, but I can't ever stay consistent. And so I find that if we can bridge that gap between these periods of time where you're super busy, you have a lot going on, maybe you're low, you're not very motivated. That's really that missing link for people to see that sustainable results and long-term results in their physique and body composition. I don't think it's necessarily, hey, this 6 to 12 week thing that you do, everybody can push for 6 to 12 weeks. It's, can you push for 6 to 12 weeks? And then can you dial back and maintain and keep that momentum going, even though it may not be as intense as it was at a certain part, right? And again, with clients, that's what I'm really trying to work on, right? We're working on habits throughout that you can build, that you can come back to when you have busy times. And then it's also working through those periods of time when they are less motivated, to have a lot going on, right? And a lot of times that's usually when people are like, I'm just going to wait to get a coach until things are less busy. But really, that is the best time to get one and to work through those periods of time, because again, those are all going to happen to us, and they can make or break you, right? So I think the big thing is, what are some like actionable things that we can do? One, it's just dial back for a bit, whether that's taking a break from tracking everything, right? Maybe you track all your calories and macros. Hey, maybe instead of tracking all your calories and macros, it's just calories and protein. Maybe it's not tracking any food, right? It's just you rely on the habits that you've built, and that's what you stick with during that period of time, right? Maybe it's 3 workouts instead of 5. Maybe it's normally you do 10 to 20 sets for everything. Maybe it's 6 sets per week for everything, right? Again, we just need to find a way to dial back and still move forward, right? So again, whatever those habits are, it's going to be different from everybody, but I think dialing back during these periods of time are super important, right? Again, this is why with clients, we're always working on improving habits, because you can fall back on these when you can't do what you normally can. I think what's really telling is like when a client first comes to me and maybe they have a period of time where they fall off, they have a lot going on, they have some trips, they have like work trips, or but something comes up, right? And they fall off for 2 weeks, and let's just use weight as an example, it comes right back up or worse, right? But as somebody gets further into the coaching, what I typically see is, people will have these periods of time where maybe they're not 100% all in on tracking, doing 6 workouts, it's 3 workouts. Maybe they stop tracking for a couple of weeks, but then they come back and they've like lost weight or it stayed the same, right? And that's to me, that's a great sign that they've built these habits, right? And sometimes there are habits that you forget about and you don't even think that you've built them, which I think is super cool. So again, that's why at all times, obviously we're shooting for results, but it's always, okay, what are the things that you've been doing recently that's helping you get these results? Cool. Look, and that's something that you want to continue to build, right? And then now you do it over, and these become habits, and that's just like your new norm. You build up that skill to where there's less resistance to staying on track, right? You just naturally do it. And that's obviously the goal. And we're always working on these things. And like I said, this really is what separates people from seeing long-term results and not, right? Some other tips, we're going to get even nerdier with it, would be, hey, again, this is a perfect time for, say, a maintenance phase, or this is a perfect time to not be in a deficit, right? This is a perfect time to just, again, like I said, dial back on your training. Instead of 6 training days a week, maybe it's 3. And just having these periods of time throughout the year, I think can be super beneficial, not only physically, but also mentally, right? I think it's great to not really be trying to push anything at any one time. But we're still doing things like, again, the basics are going to be, hey, we're at least resistance training a couple days a week. We're at least trying to get 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day. We're at least getting protein in at each meal, right? We're slowing down when eating. These are all kind of things that we want to, like, that we're working on during this period of time. But like I said, I think mentally it can be really helpful to have these periods of time as well too, and physically, right? And that's where nutrition periodization comes into play. It's, hey, we're not always trying to drop body fat. We're going to have some periods of time where maybe we push it a little bit more, and then we're going to pull back. So this can be a perfect time to implement that. Some other eating habits you can do on top of calorie tracking when you're like taking a break from that. These are, again, just more specific examples. Really slow down when eating. When you can't eat undistracted, try to eat at the dinner table versus eating on the go. Pair something tasty with something nutrient dense. Again, this comes back to us building that habit, right? Me going through a client's food log and being like, hey, this is the choice I would make. And then it clicks in their head. Okay, boom. And now that's ingrained, and now they can do this more naturally. Again, having structured meal timing. So again, maybe you're not tracking, but it's, hey, I'm still going to eat 3 meals per day, right? Around these time frames. And then again, having that good base of whole food. So this is, again, a habit that comes into play where it's like, hey, if you're aiming to get at least 1 to 2 fruit and veggie per day, and protein in each meal. It's like you got a good base. You're adding those things in versus being like, I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't have that. I need to cut this out, I need to cut that out. It's a much tougher place to be in there with that. Hopefully that was helpful there. I'll give you some advice on how to manage that period of time. So lastly, improvement from a mental standpoint by doing keto during a maintenance phase. So again, this would be, so first on this with the keto, go to episode, sorry, I'm pulling it up, episode 490. Might dive into the overview of the keto diet. But really the keto diet is going to be very low carb, high fat, high protein, moderate protein. It just depends, I think, on who you talk to with that approach. And so I think if anything, this would be a hard no for me. I don't see how this would help people mentally because you're getting super restrictive. To me, this would be even worse than, again, it just depends on the person. Sometimes tracking calories and macros can be mentally exhausting for some people, but you do have some flexibility, which is nice, but sometimes too much flexibility is not great either. And I would say an improvement from a mental standpoint, I don't see how cutting out an entire food group and really hyper focusing on eating one particular way would help mentally. If anything, I think it would be worse. And I'm sure anybody who's tried the keto or has done it, mentally, you don't really feel great by cutting out entire food groups, right? That's a lot of foods that you can't have, and that can lead to a lot of stress. This would be an approach that I would for sure not take during a maintenance phase, right? Maintenance health phase, whatever you want to call it. The goal is to bring down stress and mental capacity. I guess that would be the best way to say it. And again, by being like, oh, hey, you have to be super restrictive with the food you eat, I think it would be worse from a mental standpoint. So again, we're trying to bring all these things down in a maintenance phase. We want to have a little bit more flexibility with our food choice. And this does the complete opposite, right? This would be like, hey, in a deload, obviously we want to bring down training stress. So would it be a good idea to increase how many workouts I'm doing during that period of time? No, right? It's not going to bring down stress. If anything, it's just going to add more to it. That would be the same thing here, but 100%, this would not be an approach that I would take with a client in there. Good question with that. And great questions overall. So hopefully this was helpful. Lastly, if you have any questions on any of these, if you are struggling to stay consistent during busy times, then my free 30-minute strategy calls for, we can talk about some strategies that you can put into place. Again, if you're thinking about doing keto during a maintenance phase, again, these are all things that we can chat about on that. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes there with that. So that's it for this episode, and I will talk to you next time.